And first this morning, the Beijing Olympics are underway after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi warned U.S. Olympians not to anger the ruthless Chinese government with any negative comments while competing at the Games. But Republicans are questioning why the speaker has not held any hearings about the CCP's surveillance, genocide, and its role in the origins of COVID-19. Last week on this program, the author of Red-Handed, Peter Schweizer, raised a different conflict of interest. Watch.
Two limousine companies that her husband owned part of got contracts to ferry VIPs around the Beijing Olympics in 2008. She changed her position. Her son also, Paul Pelosi Jr., has also sought deals in mainland China. So this is a problem. And again, she may ding them occasionally on the Uyghurs, but on the big important things like exposing COVID, she has not allowed a single congressional hearing on that subject in the last 2 years.
Joining me right now to discuss this and the state of affairs is House Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Congressman, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for being here this morning. I want to get to the Competes Act, this China bill that passed the House of Representatives. I want to get your take on that. But first, got to get your reaction to what you just heard from Peter Schweizer. Is that why Nancy Pelosi has refused to do any hearings on COVID-19 and its origins?
I don't know if that's why, but it raises a lot of questions. But there's even more. Think about what Nancy Pelosi has done as Speaker. She has protected China from any investigations to the origin of COVID, even though it's killed more than 900,000 Americans. She's preventing American athletes from protesting at the Olympics. And now she's producing a bill that sends American taxpayer money to China. Because what she has done at the same time raises another question. Negotiated with the Democrats for more than 8 months to get a bipartisan committee based upon China. She said yes, and then the night before we were going to announce it, even though we brought a reporter in to report all on it from the Washington Post, she said no. So the Republicans had to go alone. This bill that you talk about later that she just put in, which I call not a Competes Act, but a Concedes Act, not only sends $8 billion to the Green UN Climate Fund that has given $100 million to China. It has unlimited green card skilled. This is what the Chinese army uses to bring people into America to spy on us, saying they're students. This bill does nothing to hold China accountable. She held 8 months when we put a bill forward to move the Olympics. She would only put it up on the day the Olympics started. I do not know what the Chinese government has on them, but it must be strong.
It's pretty extraordinary. I mean, we know that the CCP is an adversary of the United States. What are you going to do about this? We know that Peter Schweizer also reported that the Biden family accepted $31 million from the CCP. So there is a serious question of potential conflict of interest here. Are you going to investigate this, should you take the House majority?
Yeah, not just this, but we'll take action. When we take the majority, we will create that committee on China. And it would be a bipartisan committee, so you have one American voice on how we can compete, where China comes in and captures the critical minerals, when they come in and capture our medical supply and others. We will no longer have. We will investigate the origins of COVID. We'll investigate the AG's research into calling parents terrorists. We'll investigate Afghanistan. Afghanistan withdrawal. Why did we have 13 new Gold Star families? Because this president closed Bagram that allowed a suicide bomber out that killed the individual. The release of American taxpayers' reports. Why is that being allowed? There is a lot of places that we can hold them accountable, but Peter's book raises a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we might have to go further. You might have to be able to have a further investigation just within this family. What are they doing and where did this money come from? Because you take the actions of the Democrats. I do not know what China has on these people, but it must be so powerful because the actions at every turn stop and harm us, but protect China.
Well, you look at what's gone on in California. I mean, Eric Swalwell and his relationship with the Chinese spy, Dianne Feinstein, she had a Chinese spy following her around. We don't know the connections with Nancy Pelosi, although Peter Schweizer reports that her son wants to do business there. Is it all about money?
Well, remember, it's not just a spy with Dianne Feinstein. It was her driver for a decade. Eric Swalwell created a relationship with a Chinese spy who was at the college. And this bill the Democrats just passed allows the Confucius Institutes to continue to go. This is where she met Eric Swalwell. She met him when he was a city councilman. He became a congressman. Then he got on the Intel committee. She put interns in his office. When the FBI warned the leadership that he was having a relationship with a Chinese spy, Nancy Pelosi did not remove him from the Intel committee, let him stay there, and actually let him become a subcommittee chair. When we brought it to the floor, the Democrats all voted to keep him on there. Eric Swalwell cannot get a security clearance in the private sector, but government just allowed him to know all the secrets.
Why do you think Nancy Pelosi says she's running again? I mean, here you have, what, almost 30 resignations or retirements happening on the Democrat side, or they're seeking other office. You got a new Gallup survey saying Americans' political party preference is shifting to Republican, and yet the speaker came out and said, yes, she will run for re-election. Do you believe she will?
I believe she will. She said it because she's hungry for power. And remember what else is happening right now. Redistricting. We're watching what's happening in New York. Well, it's so egregious that forever gerrymandering would be known as Jerry Nadler's district. Well, they're actually picking who they want. Well, they're going to steal another 4 seats. The reason why Nancy Pelosi announced she's going to run, and now they're stealing elections in different places by redistricting and gerrymandering these, she believes she can win, even though overwhelmingly the public says they want to change. They want a secure border. They want to end inflation. They want safe and secure streets. But the Democratic policy is causing most of this problem.
Yeah, we've got this map here. And by the way, President Trump reacted to this, saying that the Republicans are getting, and here's what the President Trump said, Republicans are getting absolutely creamed with the phony redistricting going on all over the country. Even the fake New York Times is having a hard time believing how ridiculous things have gotten. This is the map that New York has been redrawn to give more territory to Jerry Nadler. How does this happen?
Well, you know what has happened? You had Eric Holder and Barack Obama go in through the last decade and run Democrats, left-leaning Democrats, for state Supreme Courts. And they're upholding this egregious maps. Even the left-leaning Brennan Center says this is wrong. 538 says it's egregious. Nobody stands with this map except the Democrats. And it's interesting that they started doing the extreme gerrymandering after Nancy Pelosi announced she was going to run for re-election. They cannot win on their merit and their policies, so now they want to rig the system to be able to keep control of the power. That is why we need everybody to join with us. Go to firepelosi.com. Do not allow this to happen. Let's make sure we have a fair election.
The State of the Union is on March 1st amidst record inflation, spikes in crime across the country, obviously multiple crises erupting across the globe, Afghanistan, Ukraine, China. And then you really haven't heard a lot about this crime spike, although President Biden went to New York last week, met with Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, and talked about guns. Look at this funeral for Wilbert Mora, where the NYPD had an incredible showing throughout New York for he, as well as Officer Jason Rivera, 22 years old and 27 years old. What a heartbreak. What can you do about this crime spike? And does Joe Biden have the will to actually change laws to ensure the safety of Americans?
The Democrats do not have the will, nor does Joe Biden, because they created much of this. The defunding of police that they have championed and actually caused the creation of. You got a vice president that pays to help people get out on bail. You've got a Democratic policy that says don't uphold the law, so you have these DAs that will not hold people accountable. Stores are closing because people are just walking in and stealing it. We need a continual change in policy here. And now you have fentanyl coming across the border. It's the #1 cause of death in America between those of 18 to 45. It's a Schedule I drug, which means you can have a mandatory minimum. But the Democrats will not renew that. That stops on February 18th. The president says he does not want to put people in jail over it. This is a #1 cause of death from those 18 to 45, and the leader of this nation, the leader of the majority of the Democrats, will do nothing about it. Why do we think they're ever going to change course when it comes to a problem that they created of why we are unsafe in the streets? I promise you this.
So,
when we take the majority, we will make sure this all changes. We will not allow cop grants to go out to any DA does not uphold the law fairly and evenly.
Real quick, are you saying that fentanyl was a Schedule I drug, meaning there was serious time spent for anyone who is trafficking that drug, and the Democrats are saying take it off of Schedule I? It goes off Schedule I February 18th? Is that what you just said? February
18th is when it goes off. Currently, it's Schedule I, which gives it a mandatory minimum sentence. We put this week on the floor a bill to extend it as a Schedule I drug, and you know what, Maria?
Yeah.
Every Democrat voted against it. They voted against your city, your community, of making it safe.
Congressman, we're going to follow that. It's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much. Kevin McCarthy joining us this morning in Washington. Thank you, sir. Quick break, and then China calls Putin the most important Olympic guest as Nancy Pelosi warns athletes not to anger the CCP. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is here.
They are going to bring, a burner phone, laptop, iPad, because they know that there is a high percent chance that China is going to tap into that. And I believe that, the Chinese government told them they have to download some kind of app, which is very suspicious, that I don't think that anyone wants to do it.
Well, that was Boston Celtics center Ennis Freedom on this program a couple of weeks ago, sounding the alarm on CCP surveillance at the 2022 Beijing Olympic Games. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was among those who called on the Biden administration to boycott the Games altogether, which kicked off on Friday with an opulent ceremony. He joins me now. Secretary, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Maria, it's great to be with you this morning as well.
So you heard Nancy Pelosi warning our athletes to shut up and dribble. What are your thoughts in terms of the games taking place right now and the safety and security of our athletes?
Well, Maria, I love the Olympics, and I love the American young people who work so hard for 4 years to compete. But they are games. They're just games, and that's how we view them. The Chinese Communist Party sees this very differently. This is their propaganda tool for weeks. Ennis Freedom spoke about burner phones, and Speaker Pelosi told our young American kids, you travel abroad and give up all your American rights. Just shut up. Don't say a word, because it is too dangerous. We allowed our athletes to be put in this terrible position. This is exactly why Xi Jinping spent the money on these games. He wants to show that he can dominate the West, that he can cause the West to operate by his rules, under his system. We've seen all the tragedy that has taken place with COVID that came from this place, the Wuhan virus. This is a Chinese propaganda operation being supported by America and by the IOC that has become corrupted in ways that let Xi Jinping walk all over them.
Well, I find it extraordinary that there has been no hearing on the origins of COVID-19. There has been no pushback on the fact that China will not allow investigators in to investigate the origins in Wuhan. You called for a total boycott of these games. What is your biggest concern right now in terms of our athletes? And what do you think Xi Jinping wants in return? I know China is spending billions of dollars on these games.
Well, what Xi wants in return is really straightforward. He wants to tell the world that the West is in decline, and look how great China is. Look what a free, wonderful nation this is, and look how beautiful it is. That's why he put a Uyghur in the opening games of the ceremonies, while he's holding 1 million of that person's family members in the western part of their China and sterilizing women and conducting the worst kind of human rights violations that amount to genocide while the genocide games is going on. So we know what she wants. She wants to whitewash his regime. What's in it for America, sadly, and the reason I think that our athletes should not have been put in this place, is that when Ennis Freedom talked about burner phones and Speaker Pelosi said, hey, go over there and don't express your views of America as a great country, just be quiet because the Chinese will pull you from the streets. We also know that they will collect information on these young people, not only the digital footprint that they have in place, why they're asking them to take burner phones like a drug dealer would, but they'll collect the DNA from these athletes. This will be stored in Chinese databases and the military's databases for years to come. No athlete should be subjected to that simply for the opportunity to demonstrate that they are a world-class athlete and they want to compete against the best athletes in the world. I called for a boycott, not because I didn't want these athletes to have the opportunity to compete and excel. We could have done this in a million places. Instead, we chose to do it in a regime that is conducting genocide and in Beijing with leadership that has no right to the glory of these games, and to be hidden by American money, sponsors that are doing terrible things to support what's going on in the western part of China. And I so regret that these games are going on today in this terrible place.
Well, we also have, news. We know that they disappeared several people because they didn't like what they were saying. They disappeared Peng Shuai, the famous tennis player. They disappeared Jack Ma. There is real concern about our athletes. I want to take a break, but after this, I want to get your take on these newly leaked documents that reveal just how unprepared the Biden administration was for Afghanistan's fall. Is the same foreign policy team equipped to stand up to Putin and Xi as Biden tries to slash defense spending? The newfound best friendship, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. We'll be right back.
Well, I think Xi Jinping believes today that his military is capable of invading Taiwan. They can execute that operation if he gives the order, if America doesn't come to its support. Now, there are reasons why he might not do that imminently, like the Winter Olympics that are coming up, or the Party Congress later this year, in which the Chinese Communist Party will give him an unprecedented third 5-year term in power. But after that, I think when the geopolitical conditions are right, maybe when the light and weather data is suitable in the Taiwan Strait, especially if Vladimir Putin pulls off an invasion of Ukraine, you could see Xi Jinping go for the jugular in Taiwan.
Well, that was Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton with me on this program last month, predicting when he expects Xi Jinping to invade Taiwan. I am back with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Secretary, so not only are we now watching for the potential of an invasion of Taiwan by Xi Jinping, we're also now waiting to see if Putin will invade Ukraine. Your thoughts on the state of affairs?
Well, Maria, let me add two more. We've watched Chairman Kim begin to increase his capabilities as well by firing longer and longer range missiles and saying he was going to conduct nuclear testing as well. And none of us should forget, Americans are headed back to Vienna to negotiate with the Iranians this week. We gave them sanctions relief. We told them, hey, take what you want. They gave us nothing in return. They've already rejected that. They're going to ask for more. So there are four fronts where this administration has completely lost the deterrence model that the Trump administration had in place. And for Americans, for people that live all across our country, this presents an enormous amount of risk, not only to Eastern Europe and Ukraine, to the people of Taiwan, but the Iranian people, the Israelis that could suffer if the Iranians should get a nuclear weapon. And certainly what happens on the Korean Peninsula is very dangerous. They're all a sign of American weakness. These are the kind of things bad guys do when an American president won't stand up for our country.
Wow, this is just serious. The CCP is about saying what they want you to say. Look at this video of a Dutch reporter on the ground while he's in the middle of a live broadcast outside of the Olympic Games, talking about the Olympic. Look what's happening. You've got CCP soldiers in the middle of his broadcast, just carting him away. I don't know what happened to this reporter after this, but they ended the live shot and stopped him from speaking. That's China. You mentioned North Korea and Iran. Why all of this activity now?
Well, Maria, let's go back to that reporter for a second. That doesn't surprise me a bit. It's what I had been talking about for an awfully long time, about the Chinese Communist Party's complete lack of openness, fairness, transparency, the desire to live the kinds of lives we have, the American way, the ideas of freedom and liberty. You know, many of the folks that are reporting on these games from NBC are doing it from studios here in the United States.